The poison didn't look like much. Just a small brown bottle sitting on a rough-hewn kitchen table. But inside that bottle was a promise. A dark, quiet promise of an end to the cold, an end to the hunger, an end to the howling Nebraska wind that had been screaming for 3 days straight. Catherine Morrison stared at it. Her fingers, thin and chapped, trembled as she reached for the pen. One last thing to do. One final word. The snow was piled halfway up her door. The world outside had disappeared, buried in a sea of white. Inside, it wasn't much better. The house was a skeleton, picked clean. She'd burned the last piece of furniture yesterday, her husband Robert's old rocking chair. The irony of that wasn't lost on her. Robert sitting in that chair night after night, his face calm, while the debts piled up like the snow outside, burying them both alive. She dipped the pen in the last of the ink and began to write. The 23rd of December, 1884. To whoever finds this letter, my name is Catherine Morrison. I am 31 years old, and by the time you read this, I will be dead by my own hand. She paused. The silence in the house was louder than the wind. It was an empty, aching silence. She wrote on, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. I cannot pay the mortgage. Mr. Cole from the bank has given me until January 1st, but he knows I have nothing left. The cattle froze last week. The well is almost dry. I have eaten nothing but flour and water for 5 days. Her hands shook so hard an ink drop splattered across the page, a black tear on the cheap paper. She almost started over, but then a cold thought washed over her. Who cares? Nothing mattered anymore. She picked up the poison bottle. Dr. Holloway, the old woman who served as the town doctor, had given it to her for the rats in the barn. Just a few drops, she'd warned, her eyes sharp and knowing. This'll kill anything. Kate had thought of rats then. Now she understood the careful way the doctor's weathered hands had held the bottle before passing it over. She unscrewed the cap. The liquid inside was clear, odorless, innocent as water. How strange that death could look so simple. She poured a small amount into a tin cup. Her hand was steady now. The decision was made. The fight was over. She lifted the cup, and that's when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A sound that was impossible. Hoofbeats, heavy and slow, crunching through the deep snow, getting closer. Her heart stopped dead in her chest. No one traveled in a storm like this. No one. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. The road was impassable. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer, then stopped right outside her door. Kate put the cup down. Her body moved on its own, a puppet pulled by strings of disbelief. She crept to the window, her fingers pulling back the thin, worn curtain. Through the swirling snow, she saw a dark shape, a large horse, and a man sitting tall in the saddle, his coat collar turned up against the wind. Even through the storm, she could feel his gaze fixed directly on her house. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps on the wood. Thump, thump, thump. The sound echoed the frantic beating of her own heart. For a wild second, she thought about ignoring it. Just turning around, picking up that cup, and finishing what she'd started before this phantom visitor could interfere. But she didn't. Curiosity, maybe, or just the shock of another human presence after so long alone. She walked to the door, her legs feeling like they were made of straw. "Who's there?" she called, her voice a dry rasp. A deep, calm voice answered through the wood. "Ma'am, my name is Isaiah Blackwood. I believe you're expecting me." Kate frowned. The name meant nothing. She wasn't expecting anyone but the grave. "I think you have the wrong house," she said. "Mrs. Catherine Morrison," the voice replied, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone. "Of the Morrison farm on Willow Creek. I'm here about your letter, ma'am." Kate's blood ran cold. Letter? Her eyes shot back to the kitchen table, to the suicide note lying there, unfinished. But that was impossible. No one could have seen it. No one could know. With trembling fingers, she unlatched the door and pulled it open just a crack. The man on her porch was not what she expected. He was tall, maybe 40, with dark hair dusted with silver at the temples. His face was weathered, carved by wind and sun, but his eyes were a startling deep blue, and they seemed to hold a world of secrets. "May I come in, ma'am?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. It's mighty cold out here. She stepped back, 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. I don't understand. What letter? The man Isaiah stepped inside, stomping snow from his boots. He removed his hat, and his gaze immediately fell on the kitchen table. He saw it all in a single glance. The note, the tin cup, the open bottle of poison. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those blue eyes. A deep, quiet understanding. Ma'am, he said, his voice soft now, I think we need to talk. He reached into his heavy wool coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't her cheap, ink-stained note. This was different. This was thick, cream-colored paper, expensive paper, and the handwriting on the outside made Kate's breath catch in her throat. It was unmistakably her own. This was waiting for me at the post office in Omaha, Isaiah said, holding it out to her. Dated 3 weeks ago. Kate took the letter. Her name was written on the front, in her own careful, looping script. Mrs. Catherine Morrison, Morrison Farm, Willow Creek, Nebraska. But she hadn't written it. She knew she hadn't. She would have remembered. She unfolded it, her knees feeling weak. The words inside were written with her pen, on her paper, in her handwriting. But they were not her words. Dear Mr. Blackwood, I am a widow in need of a husband. My farm is small but well-maintained, and I can offer a hard-working man a warm home and a fresh start. I do not seek romance, but a partnership. If you are an honest man looking for an honest woman, please come to Willow Creek before Christmas. I will be waiting. Sincerely, Mrs. Catherine Morrison. Kate read it 3 times. Her mind refused to make sense of it. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing a stranger's face. I didn't write this, she whispered, the words barely audible. Isaiah watched her, his gaze intense. You sure about that, ma'am? I'm certain. She looked up at him, fear and confusion churning in her gut. Who would do this? Why? Isaiah's eyes drifted again to the poison bottle on the table. When he looked back at her, his voice was gentler than before. Ma'am, he said slowly, I think someone cares about you a whole lot more than you know. The words hit her like a physical blow. She sank into a chair, the impossible letter still clutched in her hand. This morning she had been entirely alone in the world. Now her kitchen held a strange man and a phantom letter, and nothing made any sense at all. Isaiah moved around the kitchen, his sharp eyes taking in everything. The bare shelves, the cold fireplace, the stack of overdue bills held down by a rock on the counter. He reached up, took the bottle of poison from the table, and calmly screwed the cap back on, placing it on a high shelf she couldn't reach. Have you eaten today? He asked, his back to her. Kate shook her head, unable to speak. What about yesterday? Some flour mixed with water. Isaiah's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing along his cheek, but his voice stayed calm. I've got supplies in my saddlebags. Let me see to my horse, and then I'll fix us something warm. Wait, Kate said, finding her voice. You can't just... You came all this way because of that letter. A letter I didn't even write. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time, she saw past the calm exterior to the deep weariness in his eyes. It was a sadness that seemed ancient. Ma'am, I came here because someone, somewhere, thought you needed help. Looks to me like they were right. He gestured with his chin toward the suicide note on the table. I won't pretend to know what brought you to that point, but I'm mighty glad I got here when I did. Tears, hot and unfamiliar, pricked at her eyes. You don't understand. I have nothing. I can't pay you. I didn't come for payment, Isaiah said simply. He put his hat back on and moved toward the door. I'll be back in a moment. He paused, his hand on the latch, his gaze flicking up to the poison bottle on the high shelf. Don't you go doing anything permanent while I'm gone. Please. And then he was gone, leaving Kate alone in the sudden, ringing silence. Who? The question hammered at her. Who could have written that letter? Her handwriting was distinctive. She'd been taught by a strict tutor back east, before she'd thrown away her life for love. For Robert. She had no family left. Her parents had cut her off when she married a poor farmer. Robert's family had never approved of her, all except one, Rose, Robert's younger sister. Kate's heart did a strange little flip. Rose had been her only friend in those early lonely years on the farm. They'd practiced their penmanship together, their styles so similar they could sometimes forge each other's notes to get out of chores. But Rose was gone, had been for years. She'd left town in the middle of the night, shrouded in scandal. Something about a married man. No one had heard from her since. It couldn't be Rose, could it? The door opened again, bringing a blast of frigid air and the imposing figure of Isaiah Blackwood. He carried 2 heavy saddlebags, which he set on the counter with a solid thud. "Coffee, bacon, beans, and hardtack," he announced. "It's not fancy, but it's hot." As he moved about her kitchen, rebuilding the fire with an easy, practiced skill, Kate found herself watching him. There was something about him that didn't fit. The rough clothes and weathered face said drifter, but the way he moved, the careful economy of his actions, the intelligence in his eyes, it spoke of something else entirely. This was no simple handyman. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice quiet, "what is it you do? For a living?" His hands paused for just a second over the slab of bacon he was slicing. "I've done a lot of things, ma'am. Right now, I suppose you could say I solve problems." It wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. Soon the scent of coffee and frying bacon filled the small house. A smell so rich and comforting, it made Kate's stomach ache with a hunger she'd forgotten she had. Isaiah handed her a steaming tin cup of coffee. The warmth seeped into her frozen fingers, a small miracle in itself. "Now then," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "why don't you tell me everything? About this farm, about your husband, and about who might want to save your life badly enough to forge a marriage proposal in your name?" And for some reason she did. The words came pouring out of her, a torrent of grief and struggle held back for 3 long years. She told him about Robert's death, the crushing accident in the barn. She told him about the debts she discovered only after he was buried, a secret mountain of them that had slowly crushed the life out of her. "I sold everything," she said, her voice hollow. "My mother's jewelry, the good china, most of the livestock. It was never enough. The bank—" "Tell me about the bank," Isaiah said. And there was something in his tone, a sudden sharpness, that made her look up. "Mr. Cole runs the First National in town. He's been patient, I suppose, but his patience ran out." Isaiah's blue eyes seemed to darken, like a storm gathering over the plains. "Harrison Cole." He said the name not as a question, but as a curse. Kate nodded, surprised. "You know him?" "We've met," Isaiah said, his voice a low growl. He stared into the fire, his face a mask of grim thoughts. "Mrs. Morrison, tell me exactly how your husband died." The question was so abrupt it startled her. "It was an accident, a heavy beam in the barn. It fell, crushed him." "Were there any witnesses?" "No, I was in town. I found him when I got back." She frowned, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. "Why are you asking these questions?" "And the debts," he continued, ignoring her. "When did you learn about them?" "At the funeral," she whispered. "Mr. Cole came to me. He was very kind. He said Robert had taken out loans for new equipment," he said. "He was very sympathetic. He said he'd work with me." Isaiah was silent for a long moment, so long that the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to think very carefully. In the weeks before your husband died, did he seem worried? Frightened, maybe?" Kate thought back, dredging up memories she'd tried to bury. Robert had been different, quieter. He'd started riding into town more often at odd hours. Said he had business, important business. He was secretive, agitated. She'd assumed it was about money. Now she wasn't so sure. He was, she admitted. He was restless. He couldn't sleep. A cold dread began to seep into her bones, far colder than the winter outside. "Mr. Blackwood, what is this about?" Isaiah finally lifted his head and met her gaze. His blue eyes were like chips of ice. "Because, Mrs. Morrison," he said slowly, each word landing like a hammer blow, "I don't think your husband's death was an accident." The floor seemed to drop out from under her. The kitchen, the fire, the smell of bacon. It all tilted sideways. That's impossible," she stammered. Who would want to hurt Robert? He was a simple farmer. We don't have anything worth. You have land, Isaiah cut in, his voice sharp as a razor. Prime farmland, not a mile from where the new railroad is planning to lay its track. To the right person, that land is worth more than gold. It's worth killing for. Kate stumbled to her feet, pacing the small space like a caged animal. This couldn't be happening. It was a nightmare. A stranger appears out of a blizzard, and in a few short hours has turned her entire world upside down. Her grief, her poverty, her despair. What if it wasn't just bad luck? What if it was all part of a plan? Even if that were true, she said, her back to him, staring out at the white emptiness. What difference does it make? Robert is still dead. The debts are still real. I'm still going to lose this farm. Maybe not. She turned. Isaiah was holding the forged letter again, studying it. You mentioned your sister-in-law, he said. Rose. You said her handwriting was just like yours. Tell me about her. Kate sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. Rose was, complicated. She hated farm life. About a year after Robert and I married, there was a scandal. People said she was having an affair with a married man. She left town overnight, never came back. Did you ever hear from her again? A few letters in the first couple of years. Then, nothing. Kate paused, a forgotten memory bubbling to the surface, sudden and sharp. Wait, Robert. He got a letter from her about a month before he died. He was very upset after he read it, burned it in the fireplace. He never told me what it said. Isaiah leaned forward, his eyes blazing with intensity. Do you have any of his things left? Any papers? In the attic, she whispered. His trunk. Show me. The attic was cold and dark, smelling of dust and forgotten time. Kate held the lantern high, its yellow light dancing over stacks of old furniture and boxes filled with ghosts. In the corner sat Robert's trunk, just as she'd left it 3 years ago. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. The scent of her husband, of tobacco and leather and hay, rose up to meet her, a phantom embrace that made her chest ache. Inside were his Sunday suit, his pocket watch, and a small wooden box where he kept important papers. Isaiah watched in silence as she sorted through old receipts and land deeds. At the very bottom she found it, a single letter tucked away that Robert must have missed when he burned the other one. The paper was crisp, the ink dark. It hadn't been sent through the mail. It had been delivered by hand. She unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, familiar. It was from Rose. And as Kate began to read it aloud, the last pieces of her old life shattered completely. Dear Robert, she began, her voice shaking. I know you told me never to contact you again, but this can't wait. I've found out something you need to know. It's about Harrison Cole, and it's about what really happened to Papa's land all those years ago. Cole didn't win it in a poker game like everyone thinks. He cheated. He forged the deed. I have proof, Robert, but it's worse than that. He's been doing it to families all over the territory. He creates false debts, forges their signatures on loan documents, and then when they can't pay, he takes their land. He's building an empire on lies. I can't put more in a letter. It's too dangerous, but you have to be careful. Cole knows you've been asking questions. He thinks you're getting suspicious. Don't trust him. Don't sign anything. I'm leaving this at our old hiding spot in the Hollow Oak. Burn it after you read it. And please, Robert, for your own sake, don't try to be a hero. He's not just a cheat. He's a monster. Your sister, Rose. By the time she finished, the letter was shaking violently in her hands. She looked up at Isaiah, her eyes wide with horror. Robert never told me, she whispered. He never said a word. Isaiah took the letter gently from her. When did your husband die in relation to getting this? The letter is dated November 15th. He died on December 3rd, just over 2 weeks later. Her mind was racing, connecting the dots. Robert's secret trips to town, his worry, his agitation. He hadn't been gambling. He'd been investigating. He'd been trying to be a hero. He found something, Isaiah said, his voice a low, grim rumble. Something that got him killed. And I think Harrison Cole has been systematically ruining you ever since, making sure you'd be too broke and too desperate to ever look into your husband's accident. They descended from the attic back into the small, warm kitchen. But the house no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a trap. Kate felt like the walls were closing in, like the last 3 years of her life had been a lie, a cruel puppet show orchestrated by the smiling, sympathetic man from the bank. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice trembling with a rage she hadn't felt in years. "Who are you? You're not just a man who solves problems. You knew Cole's name. You knew to ask these questions. Who are you?" Isaiah stared into the fire, his face etched with a pain so deep it seemed to have carved the lines around his eyes. "I used to be a federal judge," he said quietly, the words dropping into the silence like stones into a well. "Appointed by the president himself. I presided over cases in 3 territories, including Nebraska." Kate stared, speechless. "I used to be," he repeated, his voice heavy with self-loathing. "I resigned my position 2 years ago. After a mistake, I made cost an innocent man his life." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I sentenced a man to hang. The evidence seemed overwhelming, but I learned later it had been fabricated. By the time I found out the truth, it was too late. An innocent man was dead, and his family was ruined." "Oh my God," Kate whispered. "The man who brought me that false evidence," Isaiah continued, his voice barely a whisper. "The man who bribed witnesses and forged documents to get that man's land was Harrison Cole." The name hung in the air between them, a venomous thing. "After I resigned, I made it my life's mission to gather enough evidence to destroy him. I've been tracking him for 2 years, documenting his crimes, looking for a way to bring him down. Your husband's case was one of many I was investigating." "Then why didn't you come sooner?" Kate cried out, the injustice of it all overwhelming her. "Why did you let me starve? Why did you let me get to the point of "Because I didn't have enough proof," he bit back, his own anguish raw and exposed. "Cole is powerful. He's careful. I had suspicions, patterns, but nothing solid enough to take to the marshals. It would have been my word against his, and my word isn't worth much these days." He took a deep breath, reining in his emotion. "But then, I got that letter, the one from you, and I knew someone else was closing in on him. Someone who knew you were in danger. Someone who knew Cole was about to make his final move. Rose, it had to be Rose. She had been watching over her all this time, a guardian angel fighting a war in the shadows. But where is she?" Kate asked desperately. "If Cole is as dangerous as you say, then Rose is in terrible danger too." "I know," Isaiah said grimly, "and I think finding her is the first thing we need to do." He looked out the window. The storm was finally starting to let up. The wind had died down, and the snow was falling more gently now. "Tomorrow," he said, "if the weather holds, we go to town, and we start looking for a ghost." That night, Kate didn't sleep in her cold, lonely bed. She sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, while Isaiah took the floor. The poison bottle still sat on the high shelf, a silent testament to the moment her life had pivoted on its axis. Just yesterday, she had been a widow at the end of her rope. Now, now she was something else. She wasn't sure what, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor. And for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't just surviving. She was ready to fight back. The dawn broke cold and gray. The world outside transformed into a silent, sculpted landscape of white. Kate woke to the rhythmic thwack of an axe splitting wood and the smell of coffee. Isaiah was already outside, his powerful swings making short work of her dwindling woodpile. She was watching him through the frosted window pane when she saw him freeze, axe in midair. He was looking down the long snow-covered track that led to her farm. In the distance, a lone rider was approaching. Isaiah dropped the axe and was inside in 3 long strides, his face a mask of grim urgency. "Company," he said, his voice low. "Someone's coming." Kate's heart hammered against her ribs. Cole? Had he somehow found out Isaiah was here? They watched from the window as the rider drew closer, a small, tough figure hunched against the cold. As the horse picked its way through the drifts, Kate let out a gasp of recognition. "It's Dr. Holloway," she said, a new wave of confusion washing over her. The old doctor never made house calls unless it was a dire emergency. Dr. Martha Holloway dismounted, tied her horse to the porch rail with practiced hands, and stomped up to the door. When Kate opened it, the doctor fixed her with a look as sharp as a scalpel. "Catherine Morrison, you look like death warmed over," she said, her voice as blunt as ever. "Good thing I came." Her sharp eyes then landed on Isaiah, taking in his size, his travel-worn clothes, his watchful stance. "I might ask what this gentleman is doing here." "This is Mr. Blackwood," Kate stammered. He came about a letter." "Did he now?" Dr. Holloway's gaze swept the room, missing nothing. The evidence of a shared meal, the bedroll on the floor, the poison bottle still on its high shelf. A flicker of understanding, or maybe relief, crossed her weathered face. "Well, Mr. Blackwood, I suppose I should thank you." "For what, ma'am?" Isaiah asked. "For keeping this stubborn girl alive long enough for me to get here." The doctor turned back to Kate, her expression suddenly grave. "I came because of Rose." The name hit Kate like a physical blow. "Rose? You've seen her?" "Doctor?" Holloway nodded grimly. "She's in town, Kate. She came to my clinic 3 nights ago in the middle of the storm. She's very sick." "Sick? How sick?" The old doctor's eyes were filled with a deep professional sadness. "She has cancer, Kate. The kind that doesn't get better. She has maybe a week, maybe less." The room tilted again. Rose was here, and she was dying. After all these years, after everything, she was just a few miles away, and she was dying. "Did she say anything?" Isaiah asked, his voice cutting through Kate's shock. "About Harrison Cole?" Dr. Holloway's eyes narrowed, studying him. "You seem to know a lot, Mr. Blackwood." "He knows everything," Kate said. "He's here to help us." That seemed to be enough for the doctor. She nodded. "Rose has been living in Denver for the past few years, under a false name. She's been working as a seamstress, but that was just a cover. What she's really been doing is collecting evidence. Everything she could find on Harrison Cole." The doctor looked from Kate to Isaiah, her voice urgent. "She has proof of it all. The land fraud, the forged documents, the murders. Your Robert wasn't the first, Kate. Not by a long shot." "Why didn't she tell me?" Kate whispered, the sense of betrayal a bitter pill. "Why did she let me suffer alone?" "To protect you," the doctor said fiercely. "Cole had people looking for her. She knew if she contacted you, she'd be putting a target on your back. She's been watching you from a distance, through friends. She knew you were struggling. When she found out she was dying, she knew she was running out of time." The forged letter. It was all starting to make sense. "So she wrote to me," Isaiah said. "She dictated it," Dr. Holloway corrected. "I wrote it. Her hands are too weak now. We knew about you, Mr. Blackwood. Rose read about your resignation, about the case involving Cole. She gambled that your conscience wouldn't let you ignore a cry for help." The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture of conspiracy and quiet heroism that staggered Kate. Rose, dying and alone, had spent her last years fighting a secret war to avenge her family and protect the woman her brother had loved. But the doctor wasn't finished. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat. It was a crudely drawn map of the town and the surrounding area. "There's a problem," she said, her voice dropping. "Rose didn't keep all the evidence in one place. It was too risky. She hid it in pieces, in different locations around the county. This map shows where." She handed it to Kate. "She wants you to find it. She wants you to finish what she started." Dr. Holloway's next words sent a chill down Kate's spine. "Cole knows she's back. He doesn't know where she is, but he's got men turning the town upside down looking for her. He knows she has something that could destroy him. He's getting desperate." "So it's a race," Isaiah said grimly. "We have to find the evidence before Cole's men find Rose. Or us." "Exactly." The doctor looked at Kate, her eyes pleading. "She's asking for you, Kate. She's hiding in the cellar of the old abandoned church west of town. She wants to see you. One last time." Kate looked from the map in her hands to the gray light outside. Leaving the farm, her only shelter for 3 years, felt like stepping off a cliff. But Rose was out there, waiting. "What if it's a trap?" she asked, the fear a cold knot in her stomach. "What if Cole is watching the church?" "He might be," Isaiah admitted. his hand resting on the butt of the revolver tucked into his belt. But staying here isn't safe either. Sooner or later, Cole's men will track us here. Right now, this storm is our cover. No one will expect us to move in this weather. He knelt in front of her, his blue eyes meeting hers. They were filled with a steady, quiet strength that gave her courage. Kate, he said, you've been alone in this fight for 3 years. You're not alone anymore. She took a deep breath, the cold air stinging her lungs. She thought of Rose, sick and hiding in a dark cellar. She thought of Robert, murdered for doing the right thing. She thought of Harrison Cole, sleeping warm in his bed, a monster disguised as a man. All right, she said, her voice clear and strong. Let's go finish this. The ride to the abandoned church was a tense, silent journey through a world of white and gray. They stuck to the back roads, the horses struggling through the deep snow, every snap of a frozen branch sounding like a gunshot. The church stood on a lonely hill, a skeletal silhouette against the sky. Its windows were boarded up, its steeple leaning like a tired old man. It looks empty, Kate whispered. Good, Isaiah said. That's what it's supposed to look like. They left the horses hidden in a thicket of pines and approached on foot, moving like shadows through the snow-filled graveyard. The cellar door was around the back, almost completely buried in a drift. Isaiah dug it out with his bare hands, then eased the heavy wooden door open. A wave of cold, musty air washed over them. Rose? Kate called softly into the darkness. A weak voice answered from the blackness below. Katie, is that you? They descended the stone steps into a cramped, damp space. In the corner, huddled under a pile of old blankets on a cot, was a woman Kate barely recognized. The vibrant, laughing Rose she remembered was gone, replaced by a frail, gaunt figure with eyes that seemed too large for her pale face. Oh, Rose, Kate breathed, rushing to her side. You came, Rose whispered, her hand cold as ice as it gripped Kate's. I knew you would. Her eyes moved past Kate to Isaiah. You must be the judge. I am, Isaiah said gently. Good, Rose said, a flicker of her old fire in her eyes. Then you'll know what to do with this. With a pained grunt, she reached under her cot and pulled out a small, leather-bound satchel. This is the first piece, she said, her breathing ragged. It's our father's old journal. I found it hidden in his study. She paused, taking a shuddering breath. Katie, Cole didn't just cheat our father out of his land. He murdered him. It's all in the journal. Papa knew what Cole was. He was getting ready to expose him, so Cole poisoned him. Made it look like a heart attack. The confession was so shocking, so monstrous, that Kate couldn't speak. Harrison Cole, the man who'd offered his condolences at her husband's funeral, had murdered her father-in-law a decade ago. The evil of the man was deeper and older than she could have possibly imagined. But that's not all, Rose continued, her voice urgent. There's a map inside the journal's cover. It leads to the next piece of evidence. A lockbox hidden at the old abandoned silver mine. Inside are the forged loan documents Cole used against Robert. The proof that the debts are fake. Suddenly they heard a sound from above. The creak of a floorboard in the church sanctuary. Isaiah drew his revolver in a single fluid motion, his body instantly alert. He put a finger to his lips, gesturing for them to be silent. Footsteps. More than one person, moving slowly, carefully across the floor above them. They were trapped. Cole's men had found them. Rose's eyes were wide with terror. They followed you! Or they were already watching the church, Isaiah whispered, moving toward the stone steps. A man's voice drifted down from above. Check the cellar. He said she might be hiding down there. There was no way out. The cellar was a stone box. A tomb. Kate's mind raced. The map. The journal. They couldn't let Cole's men get it. She looked around the dark, damp space. Her eyes fell on an old, disused well in the corner, covered by rotting planks. An idea, desperate and crazy, sparked in her mind. As the heavy cellar door at the top of the stairs began to creak open, Kate grabbed the satchel from Rose's hands. Isaiah, she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. Keep them busy. Then before he could ask what she was doing, she ran to the old well, pried up the wooden cover, and clutching the satchel to her chest, she jumped into the darkness below. The fall felt like it lasted forever. She landed in icy chest-deep water with a splash that echoed in the enclosed space. The shock of the cold stole her breath. For a moment she just floundered in the darkness, disoriented and terrified. Above her she could hear shouting, then the deafening roar of Isaiah's revolver firing in the cramped cellar. She had to hide. Her hands searched the slick, stone walls of the well until she found it. A small opening, barely visible in the dim light from above. It was an old overflow pipe, just wide enough for her to squeeze through. Holding the precious satchel high above the water, she pulled herself into the pipe. It was a tight fit, the cold, slimy stone pressing in on all sides. She wedged herself in as far as she could, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. From the cellar she heard more gunshots, then a man's scream of pain. Isaiah was buying them time. But for how long? Then she heard a new sound, a low, ominous creaking from above. The heavy footsteps of Cole's men were right over her head. They were on the main floor of the church, searching. "She's not in the cellar," a voice shouted. "The other one's dead. Where'd the woman go?" "The other one's dead." The words hit Kate with the force of a physical blow. Isaiah? No, it couldn't be. Not him. But then a different voice, one she didn't recognize, spoke, his words muffled by the stone. "Maybe she went down the well. Let's have a look." Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. A beam of lantern light cut through the darkness, shining down the well shaft directly below her hiding place. She held her breath, pressing herself harder against the cold stone, praying the shadows of the pipe would conceal her. "Looks empty," the first voice said. "Just water. Come on, let's check the graveyard." She couldn't have gone far. The light disappeared. The footsteps moved away. Kate stayed wedged in the pipe, trembling uncontrollably. Not from the cold, but from the terror and the grief. She waited for what felt like an eternity, listening to the silence, until she was sure they were gone. Slowly, painfully, she slid out of the pipe and back into the freezing water. Her legs were numb, her teeth chattering so hard she thought they would break. She had to get out. She looked up. The top of the well was a good 15 feet above her. The stone walls were slick with moss. There was no way to climb. Despair, as cold and dark as the water she was standing in, washed over her. She had escaped Cole's men, but she was going to die down here anyway, frozen and alone in the dark. And then she saw it. A rope dangling down from the opening above. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged through her. She grabbed the rope, her frozen fingers barely able to hold on, and began to pull herself up, hand over agonizing hand. When her head finally cleared the top of the well, she saw him. Isaiah. He was alive. He was leaning against the cellar wall, his face pale, a dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. But he was alive. In the corner, one of Cole's men lay dead on the floor. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice weak, but a faint grin tugging at his lips. Tears of relief streamed down Kate's face as he helped her out of the well. I heard them say you were dead." "They got the drop on me," he said, wincing as he moved his injured arm. "Bullet grazed me. Played dead until they left. Oldest trick in the book." He looked at her, his blue eyes searching her face. "Are you all right?" She just nodded, unable to speak, clutching the satchel. But their relief was short-lived. In the corner, Rose lay still on the cot. Too still. Kate rushed to her side, her heart sinking. During the gunfight, in the chaos. "She's gone, Kate," Isaiah said softly from behind her. Her heart gave out from the shock. Kate knelt by the cot, the grief a raw, physical pain. Rose was gone. Her fierce, brave friend who had fought so hard for so long. She had died in a dusty cellar, her fight unfinished. A new emotion, cold and hard as steel, began to form in Kate's heart, displacing the grief. Rage. She would not let Rose's death be for nothing. "The map," she said, her voice steady now. "In the journal. She said it leads to the silver mine." Isaiah nodded, clutching his wounded shoulder. "Then that's where we go. But we need to get out of here before Cole's other men come back." They made their way out of the church, a grim, determined pair. The world outside seemed brighter now, the sun breaking through the clouds. But for Kate, everything had gone dark. The fight for justice had become a quest for vengeance. The old silver mine was a scar on the side of a windswept hill, a place of shadows and dangerous, collapsing tunnels. According to Rose's map, the lockbox was hidden deep inside, in what was marked as the foreman's office. Isaiah's wound was worse than he'd let on. Kate had cleaned and bandaged it as best she could, but he was pale and moving stiffly. Still, he refused to stop. "Cole thinks he's won," he said, his jaw tight with pain and determination. "He thinks with Rose dead, his troubles are over. He's wrong." They found the entrance to the main shaft, a gaping black mouth in the hillside. Lighting a lantern, they stepped out of the sunlight and into the cold, oppressive darkness of the earth. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and decay. The tunnel twisted and turned, branching off into smaller passages. They followed the map carefully, their lantern casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on their eyes. Every drip of water, every skittering rat sounded like approaching footsteps. They found the foreman's office, a small cavern shored up with rotting timbers. A dilapidated desk and a broken chair were the only furniture. Behind a loose stone in the back wall, they found it, a heavy metal lockbox. But as Isaiah reached for it, a voice echoed from the darkness of the tunnel behind them. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you." They spun around. Two men stood at the entrance to the cavern, their figures silhouetted by the lantern they carried. They were two of the men from the church, and they had their guns drawn. "Looks like the little widow wasn't so good at hiding after all," the first man sneered. "The boss figured you'd be stupid enough to come here." "Give us the box," the second one ordered. Isaiah moved slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of Kate. His own gun was still in its holster. With his wounded shoulder, he'd never be able to draw it in time. "It's over," he said, his voice calm and even. "We know everything. Cole's finished." The first man laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the cavern. "Cole's a long way from finished. Now, the box." Kate's mind was a whirlwind of terror. This was it. They had come so far, only to die in a dark hole in the ground. Rose's sacrifice, Robert's murder, it would all be for nothing. Then she saw something. A thick, heavy support beam directly above the two men, held in place by a single, rusty iron pin. The wood around the pin was dark and rotten. Another desperate, crazy idea. She caught Isaiah's eye and flicked her gaze upward toward the beam. For a split second he looked confused. Then his eyes widened slightly as he understood. It was a wild gamble, a suicidal one. But it was the only chance they had. "All right," Isaiah said, raising his good hand in a gesture of surrender. "You win." As he spoke, he took a small step to his left, drawing the men's attention. It was the opening Kate needed. She grabbed a loose rock from the floor, and with all the strength she had, she hurled it at the rusty pin holding the support beam. The rock struck the pin with a loud clang. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then with a groan of protesting wood, the pin shattered. The massive beam, weighing hundreds of pounds, tore loose from the ceiling and came crashing down. The two men looked up, their faces masks of pure shock, just a second before the beam crushed them. The sound of the collapse was deafening. The entire cavern shook, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. Kate and Isaiah were thrown to the floor, the lockbox clattering beside them. For a long moment, they just lay there, coughing in the thick dust, their ears ringing. Then a new sound began, a low, deep rumbling. The walls around them were groaning. The collapse of the beam had destabilized the entire section of the mine. "We have to get out of here," Isaiah yelled, grabbing the lockbox. "Now!" They scrambled back into the main tunnel just as the foreman's office collapsed completely behind them, sealing the cavern and the two men inside it forever. They ran, stumbling through the darkness, guided by their single flickering lantern. The rumbling grew louder, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The whole mine was coming down around them. They burst out of the tunnel entrance and into the bright sunlight, gasping for air, just as the entire hillside seemed to sink in on itself with a deafening roar, sending a cloud of dust and rock into the sky. They had the evidence. They had survived. But as they stood there, covered in dust and breathing heavily, Kate knew this was far from over. Cole wouldn't stop. He would send more men. They were no longer just gathering evidence. They were being hunted. "We can't do this alone anymore," she said, her voice shaking. "We need help." Isaiah nodded, clutching the lockbox. "I know a man, a federal marshal in Lincoln, Davidson. He's one of the few lawmen I still trust. If we can get this box to him, he'll have enough to issue a warrant for Cole's arrest." "Lincoln is 100 miles away," Kate said, "and Cole's men will be everywhere, looking for us." "I know," Isaiah said, his gaze fixed on the horizon, "but we have no other choice." Their journey became a desperate flight. They traveled by night, hiding during the day, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. Every traveler on the road was a potential threat, every distant plume of smoke a sign of danger. They finally reached Lincoln, exhausted, wounded, and running on sheer will. Marshal Davidson was a grizzled veteran with honest eyes who listened to their story with a growing sense of outrage. When he saw the contents of the lockbox, the forged deeds, the fake loan documents in Cole's own hand, his face hardened. "My God," he breathed. "This is enough to hang him twice over, but he's got judges and politicians in his pocket. To make this stick, we need something more. Something undeniable." "There is something more," Kate said, her voice barely a whisper. She told him about Rose's last words, about her father's journal and the final piece of the puzzle, Cole's own ledger, where Rose had claimed he kept a record of every crime. Rose said she found it in his office safe. She hid it, but the journal should have a clue to its location. Davidson examined the small leather-bound journal. Tucked into a pocket on the inside cover was a single folded piece of paper. On it was a complex series of numbers and letters. It looked like nonsense. "It's a code," Isaiah said, studying it. "A book code. He's referencing a page, a line, and a word in a specific book." "But which book?" Davidson asked in frustration. Kate's mind went back to the attic, to Robert's trunk, the books he had kept. There weren't many. An almanac, some farm manuals, and his Bible. "His Bible," she said suddenly. "Robert's family Bible." Cole knew Robert was a religious man. He'd be arrogant enough to use Robert's own Bible as the key to his code, thinking no one would ever find it. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. Davidson dispatched two of his best deputies to ride back to Kate's farm with her, under the cover of darkness, to retrieve the Bible. The farm felt different now. It was no longer a prison of grief, but a place of secrets. As the deputies stood guard outside, Kate and Isaiah climbed once more to the cold, dusty attic. She lifted the heavy Bible from the trunk. It felt like she was holding the key to everything. They worked by candlelight, cross-referencing the numbers in the code with the pages and verses in the Bible. Slowly, painstakingly, a message began to emerge. It wasn't a location, it was a name. Deputy Peterson. Kate looked at Isaiah, confused. "Who is Deputy Peterson?" A grim look settled on Isaiah's face. "He's one of Davidson's most trusted men, the one he sent ahead to keep an eye on Cole in town." The blood drained from Kate's face. The traitor wasn't in Cole's gang. He was inside the marshal's office. Their entire plan, their only hope, had been a lie. Davidson, Isaiah, and Kate, they were all walking into a trap. Peterson knew every move they were making. He was feeding it all directly to Harrison Cole. "We have to warn him," Kate said, scrambling to her feet. But just as they started for the stairs, the attic door slammed shut from the outside. The heavy sound of a wooden bar being dropped into place echoed in the small space. They were locked in. A voice called up from downstairs, a voice they recognized. "I'm afraid your journey ends here, Judge," Deputy Peterson called, his voice laced with mock sympathy. "Mr. Cole sends his regards." They heard the distinct smell of kerosene, then saw a flicker of orange light under the crack of the door. He was setting the house on fire. "He's going to burn us alive," Kate whispered, her heart seizing with terror. Smoke began to seep into the attic, thick and acrid. Isaiah rushed to the single, small window at the far end of the attic. It was boarded up from the outside. He threw his good shoulder against it again and again, grunting with pain and effort. The boards groaned but held fast. The smoke was getting thicker, choking them. Kate could feel the heat rising through the floorboards. Panic began to set in. This was it. This was how it ended. Burned to death in her own home, the evidence turning to ash with them. Then Isaiah stopped battering the window. He was looking at something in the corner of the attic, something they had ignored before. An old heavy iron bed frame, rusted and forgotten. "Help me!" he choked out, his eyes streaming from the smoke. Together they dragged the heavy frame across the floor. It took all their strength. "On three!" Isaiah yelled over the growing roar of the fire below. "1, 2, 3!" They swung the bed frame like a battering ram, slamming it into the boarded-up window. The first blow splintered the wood. The second shattered it completely, sending boards and glass flying out into the night. Cool, clean air rushed in. They leaned out, gasping, their lungs burning. They were 2 stories up. The ground below was hard and frozen, but the fire was raging now, flames licking up the outside walls of the house. It was jump or burn. "I'll go first," Isaiah said. "Try to break my fall on that snowdrift." He swung himself out, hung for a second, and dropped. He landed hard, but the snow softened the impact. He struggled to his feet, his injured arm useless, and looked up at her. "Come on, Kate! Jump!" She closed her eyes and leaped into the night. The fall was terrifying, a brief, weightless moment before she hit the ground with a painful jolt. For a second, the world went black. Then Isaiah was there, pulling her to her feet, dragging her away from the inferno that had once been her home. The farmhouse was a pillar of fire against the black sky. Standing in the driveway, silhouetted against the flames, was Deputy Peterson. He was watching the house burn, a satisfied smile on his face. He hadn't seen them escape. "Let's go," Isaiah whispered, pulling her into the darkness of the trees. "While he's distracted." They circled around through the woods, their hearts pounding. They had escaped, but they had lost everything. The Bible, the evidence, the farm. Everything was gone. But as they watched from the shadows, they saw something that made Kate's blood run cold. Peterson wasn't alone. Another man stepped out of the darkness to join him. A man whose face Kate had seen in her nightmares for 3 years. Harrison Cole. He had come to watch her die himself. "It's done," Peterson said. "The house, the evidence, the widow, and the judge. All gone." "Excellent work, Deputy," Cole said, his voice smooth as poison. He handed Peterson a thick envelope of cash. "Your loyalty will be rewarded." But then Cole's eyes narrowed, scanning the burning wreckage. "What about my ledger? You were supposed to retrieve it." Peterson paled. It must have burned with everything else, sir." Cole's face twisted into a mask of fury. He backhanded Peterson across the face, a crack that echoed in the night. "You fool! That ledger is the only thing that ties me directly to the murders. If they somehow survived, if they find it—" "They didn't survive," Peterson stammered. "No one could survive that." But Kate and Isaiah, hidden in the darkness, exchanged a look. Cole's ledger, the ultimate proof. It wasn't in the house. Rose had hidden it. The Bible code hadn't been a trap. It had been a warning. And a clue. The code hadn't just revealed Peterson's name. It had been a set of instructions. A verse from the book of Proverbs. "The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion." And the location? It wasn't a place. It was a person. The one person in town Cole would never suspect. The one person who saw everything and was trusted by everyone. Dr. Holloway. Rose had given the ledger to the doctor for safekeeping. They had one last chance. The final confrontation took place not on a lonely farm or in a dark mine, but in the one place Harrison Cole felt safest, his bank. After their escape, Isaiah had used a friendly farmer's telegraph to send a coded message to Marshall Davidson in Lincoln, warning him of Peterson's betrayal. The trap was set. Kate and Isaiah, along with Dr. Holloway, walked into the First National Bank the next morning, just as it opened. Harrison Cole was in his opulent office, looking out the large window at the town he considered his personal kingdom. When he saw them walk in, alive, the color drained from his face. For a moment, the mask of the respected businessman slipped, revealing the terrified monster beneath. "You," he stammered. "Surprised to see us, Mr. Cole?" Kate said, her voice steady and cold. She was no longer the frightened widow he had terrorized. She was Rose's heir. She was Robert's avenger. Peterson assured me you were dead, Cole blustered, trying to regain his composure. Peterson made a mistake, Isaiah said, his hand resting on his revolver. Just like you did. Dr. Holloway stepped forward, holding up the thick, leather-bound ledger. Looking for this, Harrison? Cole stared at the book, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. It was over. He knew it. It's finished, Cole, Kate said. We have everything. The journal, the forged deeds, and now your own confession, written in your own hand. He made a desperate lunge for the ledger, but Isaiah was faster, blocking his path. At that exact moment, the front doors of the bank burst open and Marshal Davidson entered, flanked by 4 heavily armed deputies. Deputy Peterson was between 2 of them, his hands shackled. Harrison Cole, Marshal Davidson's voice boomed through the bank. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and the murders of Robert Morrison, Thomas Carpenter, and at least 15 others. Cole looked around wildly, a cornered rat looking for an escape that wasn't there. His empire, built on lies and blood, had crumbled to dust in a matter of seconds. As the deputies dragged him away, his eyes met Kate's. They were filled not with remorse, but with a venomous, bottomless hatred. You, he spat. You were nothing. A pathetic widow. I should have killed you 3 years ago. Yes, Kate said, meeting his gaze without flinching. You should have. The trial of Harrison Cole was the biggest event the territory had ever seen. Families he had ruined came from all over to testify against him. With the evidence from Cole's own ledger, the verdict was swift. Guilty on all counts. The last time Kate saw him, he was standing on the gallows, a rope around his neck, his arrogant face finally showing the fear he had inflicted on so many others. Justice, slow and hard-won, had finally arrived. With the bank's assets seized by the federal government, the families who had lost their land were repaid. Kate's mortgage was cleared. The farm was hers again, free and clear. Her parents, hearing the news, came back. The reunion was tearful, full of apologies and forgiveness for years lost to Cole's lies. Her family was whole again. A few months later, on a warm spring day, Kate stood in the graveyard, placing fresh wildflowers on the graves of Robert and Rose. Isaiah stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. His arm had healed, and he'd been offered his judgeship back. He'd accepted. They'd be proud of you, Kate, he said softly. They'd be proud of us, she corrected. She looked at the smoldering, blackened ruins of her old farmhouse, which were being cleared away to make room for a new foundation. It wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The letter she had started writing on that dark December day, her goodbye to the world, lay torn in pieces at the bottom of a trash heap. Its dark promise had been broken, replaced by the promise of a new day, a new life. She had faced down the monster who had destroyed her world, and in the process she had found a strength she never knew she possessed. The poison was gone, and in its place, hope was beginning to grow. The story of the widow's last letter was a strange and terrible one, full of twists and turns, darkness and despair. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest evil can hide behind the most respectable face, and that even in the deepest, coldest winter of the soul, a single knock at the door can change everything. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the secret battles people are fighting all around you, every single day. If you enjoyed this story and you want to hear more strange, dark, and mysterious tales, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next.